All right, so when asked to define genes, you come up with all this stuff. Here's what I'm going to tell you. There is a physical definition for genes. There is a hard and fast physical definition for genes. Like I can define lab stool. There's a hard and fast definition for a lab stool. It is a physical definition. I can go out and I can touch, see, photograph a lab stool. There is a physical definition for genes. Okay, and this is important. You've got to understand this. Now, I know we have not talked about heredity yet. We do that a little bit later in the year. So we're dipping into this concept, and then we'll come back to it when we talk about heredity. A gene. Oh, let me get consistent here with, what did we have last time? Purples and oranges and reds. Green. I had blue and red. Where is this going? Who knows? DNA. DNA. I would love to hear a crowd chanting that at a sporting event instead of USA. DNA. DNA. Oh, wouldn't that be? Oh my gosh. Oh. Okay, I have an idea. I'll have to pause for a second. Hold on. There is a physical definition for genes. A gene is a section of DNA. That's it. A gene is an actual section of DNA. So I'm going to have to use some other color here. What can I use? I'll use this. It might be, from here to here. That might be a particular gene. Genes are actual sections of DNA. So a gene is an actual section of DNA that codes for some characteristic, for some trait. There is a gene that causes an organ. You should be writing this down. There is a gene that causes an organism to grow eyes. Did you know that? That gene looks pretty much the same in you as it does in a mouse. Because your eyes are not all that dissimilar from mice eyes, mouse eyes, meese eyes. Mouses. They're not dissimilar from mouse's eyes. So a gene is just a section of DNA that codes for a particular trait. And because of the fact that we have sequenced the entire human genome, we know what all the little bases in the human DNA say or do, we can actually look at an individual gene. We can isolate that gene. We can pull it out. We can tell you which version of that gene you have. So when we talk about genetics, we'll talk about genetic testing, and we'll talk about getting tested for a particular gene and knowing if somebody has a particular version of a gene. Okay, so that's a gene. Okay. Weren't we talking about evolution, Moser? What is wrong with you? You keep making left turns off the road. Jeez. It's Stumpy! She's back. So we said that there are two sources of the variation that we find in any population. What are those two sources? Environment's one of them, and genetics. Environment, genetics. Sources of variation. Poor Stumpy. She got the short end of the ear lottery. Maybe it's a good thing for her, maybe it's a bad thing. For right now, she seems to be doing just fine. I saw one of her descendants on my morning walk with the dog. So they're out there. The stumpy-eared rabbit ran across my path. So we're not going to talk too much right now about the environment. I want to focus on the genetic piece here. I want to focus on the genetic piece that underlies that variation that we see. So let's say that ear length in rabbits is controlled by one single gene. But there is one single gene that controls ear length, and if you get this version of it, you have nice long ears, and if you get this version of it, you have little shrubby, squatty ears. It's probably more complicated than that. Most things are. How many of you have heard things like, well, if you have a brown-eyed parent and a blue-eyed parent, you will have this color of eyes, and if you have a blue, it's baloney, it's bogus. There are multiple genes that are involved in that. It's called polygenic, and ear length in rabbits is probably not only polygenic, but there are all kinds of environmental influences. We talked about that with frozen water bottles and the rabbit hutches. But let's imagine for a second, let's grossly oversimplify this. Let's imagine that there's a single gene that controls ear length in rabbits. And if you have version big E, you have long ears. And if you have version little e, you got short ears. And you got to have two versions of little e to get those short ears. So Stumpy's got little tiny ears, and she has lots of little tiny eared babies, and she's hopping around my neighborhood with her little stubby ears. We can not only look, we can look at distribution of a trait, Gesundheit. So we looked at normal distributions and skewed distributions and bimodal distributions yesterday. We can also go underneath it all and think about the genes that might underlie that trait. And this is evolution. So we can look at gene frequency when we look at changes in population. We said we can look at shifts in the distribution of a trait when we look at populations. But the underlying reason for that very often is shifts in gene frequency. Okay? So this is a kind of crazy little chart. What does it mean? It's a bunch of jagged lines. I don't understand. It's okay. It's a hard one to understand. I should put in a better chart. I don't like that. Yeah. I should. But we're going to talk about it anyway. We're going to interpret this a little bit. So on this chart, on the x-axis, we have the number of generations. So what is a generation? A generation is you have babies, that's the second generation. Your babies have babies, that's the third generation. Their babies have babies, that's the fourth generation. We just keep it going as long as everybody keeps having babies. We said rabbits could have, 10 generations in a summer if one individual keeps reproducing. So that x-axis is the number of generations. And this y-axis, now it's labeled 0 to 1. I'm going to change that a little bit, sort of mentally. I would like you to as well. Let's say it's 0 to 100. Okay. What that means is the percentage of the population that has a particular gene. Oh, well then that's not so hard to understand. So this, I'm going to abbreviate here, percentage population with a gene. Any particular gene, we can pick a gene. So for instance, we could look at what percentage of the population has at least one copy of that short-eared gene. And we said Stumpy has to have 2 copies. And all the little long-eared bunnies out there, well, it's funny. They could have 1 copy or 2. So we can look at what percentage of the population is carrying at least 1 copy of this little e. And if nobody in the population has that little e, then our line is right here. 0% of the population has it. If every single rabbit out there has at least 1 copy of that gene, then 100% of our population has it. Okay. Most often, the truth is somewhere in the middle. So maybe starting out, when I first saw Stumpy, maybe only 20% of the population actually had a short-eared gene. Maybe none of them had the double E that it took to get 2 short ears, because I had never seen a short-eared rabbit in my neighborhood prior to that. Well, as Stumpy did really well, and she produced lots of little babies, what do you think happened to the percentage of that short-eared gene in the population? Oh, baby, it went right up. Now, are we ever going to get to a point where 100% of the population has a copy of the short-eared gene? Probably not. Probably not. We don't know who Stumpy's mating with. We don't know what the genetics of all the other rabbits in the neighborhood are. No idea. But I would say that it's a safe bet that the percentage of that gene has increased in the population. as I said, Stumpy has done well. I have seen lots of little Stumpy juniors running around. Stubby, Stumpy, whatever we're calling her. This idea right here, evolution is changes in gene frequency in a population over many generations. That is huge. That's enormous. We call this the modern synthesis. And this has actually been around. This is an idea that's been around since, I want to say, the 1960s. We first figured out what DNA looked like in the 1950s. We got a definitive picture of what DNA was. And so that gave us a different understanding of genetics because we were able to actually tie it back to DNA. And sometime after that, biologists proposed that really what we're seeing when we see evolution is just changes in gene frequency in a population. That's all we're seeing. It's changes in gene frequency in a population. And that's called the modern synthesis. So, what influences those changes in gene frequency in a population? Why are there so many stubby juniors in my neighborhood? Could more than one thing influence the changes in gene frequency in a population? What if Stubby just gets around? Seriously, what if she is more rabbity than the average rabbit? She has some particular skill at doing what rabbits do, and she happens to have really big litters. And she happens to always park her little litters closest to the best sources of tasty clover. Maybe she's just lucky. Could that influence the frequency of that short-eared gene in the population? Can luck influence your life? Yeah, it can, actually. It can. Could Lucky have some advantage genetically? She could. Maybe on top of having short ears, she's also just faster than your average rabbit. Faster than your average rabbit. Rabbits. Lots of things can influence the distribution, the frequency with which a gene shows up in the population. This is what we expect to see. If there is some advantage to having a particular gene, it usually gets more common. And if there's something about that gene that ends up being harmful to individuals, it usually gets less common. So what if there was a gene that made rabbits really slow? Do you think a lot of those really slow rabbits would survive? Do you think that gene would become real common in the population? Probably not. Because what did we say wants to eat rabbits? All together now. Everything! Woo! Woo! No wonder they look so nervous. What wants to eat rabbits? Everything. A gene that gives rabbits exceptional speed, a gene that makes turbo bunnies. Dude, turbo bunnies. That gene's going to become probably quite common because it gives them an advantage. Something that makes them slow. Something that makes rabbits attracted to foxes. Hello, fox. That gene is probably not going to get real common in the population. It confers a disadvantage. It is actively harmful to the organism. It will probably not become all that common. So, graph on the top. If this is our starting gene frequency, and this is our ending gene frequency, would you guess that that gene confers an advantage or a disadvantage? Disadvantage, yeah. That gene over many generations has become less common in the population. This gene here on the bottom, if that's the starting percentage, tiny little percentage of the population has that gene. And this is almost 100% of the population has that gene by the end. Do you think that gene confers an advantage or a disadvantage? I would say that there's something really good about that gene. Having that gene makes you more likely to survive, makes you more likely to have offspring who survive. Okay. So what's the modern synthesis? What is evolution really? It's a shift in gene frequency. That's not nearly as exciting as a lot of the other definitions we could come up with, but it's true. It's just a shift in gene frequency. Do you want to guess how Frank made a living? He was a circus performer. This was in the days when they very rudely called things like this freak shows. Like the term freak show comes from someplace. There used to be things that were labeled as freak shows, and people paid, in those days, the whole princely sum of probably a nickel to go in and stare at Frank Lantini. Or the Bearded Lady, or the Wolf Boys, or whatever else the feature was. Frank Lantini actually made a good living. He married. He had 4 children, all of whom had 2 legs. Why are we talking about a man with 3 legs, Moser? Seriously? Seriously. This seems like a little bit outside the pale, really. Well, I want to talk about a man with 3 legs because I want to talk about cost-benefit analysis. What is cost-benefit analysis? Okay, again, Moser, this is not economics. Why are we talking about cost-benefit analysis? If I want to talk about cost-benefit analysis, I'm going to go see Mrs. Farmer. What is it? Talk amongst yourselves. Talk at your table. Come up with a definition. What do you think cost-benefit analysis is? Cost-benefit analysis is analyzing the cost of something versus the benefit to you. I'll give you a really simple example. You are sitting down one Saturday afternoon, and you think, I'm hungry. I'm really hungry. I want something to eat. If you get up and walk to the kitchen and get yourself something to eat, is there a benefit to that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you get food. Is there a cost to that? Yes. What's your cost? Energy. You're expending energy. You can't. Okay. Well, let's yes, but let's be more scientific. Yeah, you're expending energy. What's the cost? Expending energy. What's the benefit? Getting calories. So the cost is expending calories, because that's all energy is. The benefit is getting calories. If the only thing in the house is a 1 calorie puff of rice, and it's going to take you 8 calories to walk to the kitchen, is there a net gain? No, you're behind. Now, if there's a nice juicy 1,000-calorie, I don't know what, super double chocolate-covered cheeseburger with bacon on top of it, sitting in your kitchen, and it's going to cost you 8 calories to go get 1,000 calories, is there a net gain? Yeah. You shouldn't eat a double chocolate-covered bacon-added cheeseburger under any circumstances. It sounds disgusting. Cost-benefit analysis weighs the cost of something versus the benefits to you. You can think about this in terms, who here drives already? Who here is already driving? Oh, nobody. Okay. All right. Then let's use a different metaphor. Well, at least think in terms of driving. You've all been in a car, right? Okay. What if you get your driver's license, you decide you take a job, you manage to get a job in Boardman. You're driving from Calcutta to Boardman every day. When you figure out the mileage your car gets and the cost of gas, you're spending $10 to go to work. What if they only want you for 2 hours and you're making $5 an hour? What's your cost? What's your benefit? You're in the hole. Well, if it costs you $10 to go there and back, you're breaking even. What if it costs you $10 to go there and back and they only want you for an hour? You're getting $5. Is there a benefit? No, it's not worth your time. Cost-benefit analysis weighs the cost of something versus the benefit to, in biology, an organism. So now, why are we talking about a 3-legged man? Because he has 3 legs, and if Frank Lantini had been born with a normal pair of legs, we wouldn't have his picture up on the board. So, cost-benefit analysis applies to building your body. It takes energy to grow a body. Did it take more energy to grow 3 legs than 2? Yes. Does it take more energy to support 3 legs than 2? Yes. It was actually estimated, I had read this years ago, it was Franklin Tini or somebody estimated, and I don't know how they got the numbers, that he required something like an extra 100 calories a day to support the leg. So if a normal man, his height, his weight, with his metabolism, needed 2,000 calories a day to maintain his weight, Franklin Tini needed 2,100 calories a day to maintain his weight because that extra leg required more calories. Huh. Who knew? Who knew? Cost-benefit analysis. So, well, we'll continue the idea of cost-benefit analysis. You all question? You all understand the idea that different types of food have different calories, right? Rice cake, I don't know, 20 calories. I don't know what a rice cake has in it. I don't count calories. Double chocolate coated bacon cheeseburger, significantly more calories than the rice cake. In the wild, are there foods that have more? Who here has eaten wild food? Okay. Meat that was hunted from the wild? Okay. Venison, rabbit, squirrel, groundhog? Anybody eat groundhogs? I love groundhog. Okay. Who has eaten wild berries? Gone out and found a blueberry bush and gone berry picking, black raspberry bush. Good. Good, good, good. Embrace your inner hunter-gatherer. Go out and find wild food. Now, are all those wild foods similar from a calorie perspective? Huh? They all have them. They all have them. Every fall, my family goes out. We go pawpaw picking. Pawpaws. Who knows what a pawpaw is? Have you eaten pawpaws?
You said you were going to bring one in.
Oh, and yeah, sorry about that. Whoops. Next year. Look me up next year in the fall, because they're all gone now.
So you lied to me?
I forgot to bring you pawpaws. I brought them to school. I forgot to share them with you. I'm so sorry.
No sharing in school.
So, pawpaws are the highest calorie wild food you're going to find in Ohio. They are rich and creamy. They taste like a cross between banana pudding and mangoes, and they're delicious. Sorry, I'm telling you all this and I didn't bring any to share. That's awful. That is terrible. I have frozen pawpaw pulp. Maybe I'll dig some of that out of the freezer and bring it to you. So they're super high calorie. What if you eat bark? You think that has a lot of calories?
No.
You should not eat bark, just saying. But if you decide to eat bark, it's going to take your body some calories to digest it. You might actually end up with negative calories. They say that about celery. I think it's a joke that celery takes more calories to digest than you get from it. Who knows? So different foods have different calorie values. And tomorrow, we're going to do an activity where we're going to talk about some animals of different sizes. We're going to talk about some animals of different sizes. These are my badly drawn birds. And you can see that there's something different about these birds. What's different? Their beak size. In general, more body requires more calories. Can having a bigger body be an advantage? Yeah, absolutely. If you're taller, maybe you're better able to defend against predators. Maybe you can reach things on high shelves in the kitchen without climbing up on the counters. Okay, not in the wild so much. Having a bigger body can be a big advantage. But what does a bigger body require? More calories. More calories to sustain that larger body. This is where tiny folks have a huge advantage. They can get by on fewer calories. So we've got these 3 different birds, all the same species, natural variation. Who do you think is going to require the most calories?
Big bird.
Big beak. Yep. They will require more calories. Now, if we're looking at wild foods, do all wild foods have equal calorie values? Of course not. We just established this. So tomorrow you're going to be doing an activity where we are going to simulate a population of birds, that'd be these guys, on an island with a variety of food sources over multiple generations. We're going to look at what happens. Okay? So, that's where we will finish for today. What I'd like you to do now, get out those vocab packets. Are there any things in there, I think there are, that you are better able to discuss in your own words now that we've talked than before we did? The other thing I want to remind you to do is this. Use the social learning part of your brain. Discuss with the people sitting at your table. Hey, I think this means this. Hey, I think this means this. Talk about it. Doesn't mean you all come up with an identical definition, but you talk and you understand. Okay? Questions, comments, concerns?